We talked about this at the time in summer of 2023, but the Mirror dropped a bunch of articles talking about how Millie Gibson, who starred as Ruby Sunday in Doctor Who, was branded as a diva on the set of Doctor Who and was annoyed about night shoots. And we talked about this at the time. These were stories from Janina Cube, Nicola Fahy, and Laura Armstrong. And one of the weird things about this story is that it was insiders who were talking about this and leaking this to the Mirror. Insiders were talking about this, presumably people with ties or connections to Bad Wolf, who were leaking this bad behaviour supposedly from Millie Gibson. And then a few months later, the Mirror also ran another story from Nicola Medvin saying that Doctor Who companion Millie Gibson was dropped from the next series of the BBC show as a replacement is revealed. And this was the announcement of Valida Sethu, who would play Belinda in the next season of Doctor Who. And the use of the word dropped here, we talked about this at the time when the story dropped was a very interesting choice of words. Once again, this was coming from insiders. Decision by Russ T Davies to write out the former Coronation Street star. So the reason we're talking about this today is that because Millie Gibson has another show to promote, a Channel 5 new series where that's sort of like a Channel 5 answer to Bridgerton or Downton Abbey, she has been opening up a little bit more about her time on Doctor Who. And she's been talking about her relationship with Ncuti Gatwa. Ncuti Gatwa, who she confirms is probably the most charismatic person you'll ever meet, and made her up my game. She says, I think he makes me a better actor. Watching him become the Doctor, I felt like I had the front row seat to witnessing greatness. And she was talking about in this interview the rumours or these supposed leaks or insider gossip branding her as a diva being annoyed about night shoots. We also had this little tidbit here. The comparisons were so blatant to Ruby Sunday and Rose Tyler that Davis insisted that Gibson chop her hair into a short bob lest she look a bit too much like Billy. Even with her experience, handling this increased scrutiny as a just-turned 19-year-old was a whole other ballgame. Gibson learned when a tabloid report emerged in the summer of 2023 claiming that she'd been acting like a, quote, diva behind the scenes. She didn't comment on the claims at the time, not when the allegations first emerged, nor when new reports half a year later claimed that she had been, quote, dropped from the show before her first series could even air. That wasn't the case. Gibson had known that she was coming back for series 2 when the, quote, diva reports came out. Unfortunately, revealing this would have jeopardised the series' tightly wrapped plots, putting her in a tough position where she wasn't able to, quote, speak up and defend herself. Quote, I couldn't be like, it's a lie, because they'd be like, well, that's spoilers, she says. It was quite hard to stand up for myself without ruining the show. I was like, oh, this is horrific because it just looks like it's true. It must have been pretty unpleasant reading about this at such a young age. And she says, oh, it was awful. She says, an obvious pang of pain in her voice. What was frustrating was the amount of people that were like, oh, so sorry that this has happened, mate, referring to her inaccurately reported removal from the show. And I was like, yeah, it's not happened, but thank you. If she took anything away from the experience, it was the way those close to her rallied in private. Gatwa, who forced his own negative attention when he was cast as the Doctor, was a particular comfort. He has had his time with that, and it's just about being able to try and shut it out, she says. Let's go over the timeline here. So in summer 2023, before the 60th anniversary is even broadcast, and Millie Gibson's not going to make her debut in Doctor Who properly until that Christmas, we have this story that comes from insiders, leaking to the Mirror that she's a diva and difficult to work with and doesn't like night shoots. Then we move to January 2024, after the broadcast of The Church on Ruby Road, but before the broadcast of Space Babies, and we get this exclusive from the Mirror, Nicola Medvin, saying that Millie Gibson has been, quote, dropped from the next series. And the idea that they couldn't spoil Millie Gibson's role in season 2 of Doctor Who is absolutely ridiculous now that we know what her role was in season 1 and season 2 of Doctor Who. If we assume for the sake of argument that it was true that Millie Gibson's role was always going to be to leave as a full-time companion at the end of the first season and then have a couple of guest appearances in the second season, I honestly don't understand how on earth that couldn't have been said in order to defend your star, to defend Millie Gibson, when these reports of her being difficult to work with and being branded as a diva were making their way through the press. Why on earth could Russell T Davies not say something, or Jane Tranter, or Julie Gardner, or Phil Collinson, or whatever? Why on earth couldn't they say, oh, we've enjoyed working with Millie and we look forward to work with her again? And that's literally all you have to say. You don't have to confirm anything plot-wise. You can just, show up in public for your co-lead, who at the time, like I said, is still a teenager who you have a duty of care for. In fact, in April 2024, it got confirmed that, yeah, she's returning and Valdez Sethu is the Doctor's new companion in season 2. Which, honestly, at this point in the narrative, in hindsight, just kind of feels like damage control. And knowing what happened with season 2 of Doctor Who and the messiness in terms of the reshoots and everything towards the tail end of filming, and of course going through the plot and everything of season 2, and how late in the game Valida Sethu was brought on board as well, it's looking increasingly likely that, yeah, Millie Gibson was pushed at the end of season 1. They brought in Valida Sethu and hastily rewrote Millie Gibson into season 2 and in a reduced role to finish her story. That's what it looks like from the outside. And the fact that supposed insiders leaked this diva story, it makes me wonder, did Bad Wolf set Millie Gibson up to fail here? Their literal teenage co-lead, and they decided to throw her under the bus? Or when supposed insiders were leaking that she was a diva, didn't come to her public defense? Honestly, say what you will about stories like the Interstellar Song Contest, stories like Empire of Death and The Legend of Ruby Sunday. For me, this here is the low point of the Bad Wolf era for me. That essentially a Bad Wolf insider, God knows who it was, it could have even been somebody from the higher up at Bad Wolf, decided that they didn't like Millie Gibson for whatever reason, and decided to very publicly throw her under the bus. As Greg Vigan in the chat says, Rusty Davies has a history of this. He does. In regards to Christopher Eccleston, in the first season of Doctor Who in 2005, when he decided to leave, and he was going to do all the promotion and leave amicably, and that was going to be fine, and then people at the BBC dropped the "he was tired" quote, which was completely fabricated, and then the Christopher Eccleston had to chase them for an apology, which they ultimately gave. And when it comes to Rusty Davies, he couldn't say anything. He can't comment on anything. It's unbecoming of somebody to defend someone in public. Isn't Russell T Davies calling people out in public, in very public settings, literally part of his, brand at this point? This was him at the South Bank Sky Awards in summer 2022.
It's also worth saying, while I've got this stage, this was made by Channel 4. Public service broadcaster dedicated to making this sort of programme. We know that the government has said they're going to sell that off. I know the government's wounded at the moment, but it's like a wounded dog. A wounded dog bites everyone, and the rabies will spread. It's still in danger. They have said they're selling Channel 4, and they have said they're stopping the licence fee by 2027. And we have to realise that things the Tories say they will do, they do. They're very good at that. We're full of doubt. They're not. They will do this. It is wrong. I know I'm kind of trying to speak into the converted, but there's money in this room. And if there's money in a room, that means there's Tory voters in here. It does. You are here, and you're certainly watching at home, so please know you are voting for murderers, bastards, abusers, and liars.
So Russell T Davies can frequently go into awards rooms and very publicly in broadcast video talk about how Tories are bastards, murderers and liars and stuff, and call people out, rightly, in my opinion, but he can't defend his teenage co-star when apparently they're being smeared in the press. Something doesn't add up here. Obviously, I have no evidence to name names, but it makes me think that the supposed insiders who leaked this to the Mirror, was it Russell? Or Russell adjacent? Or Russell linked? And the fact that Millie Gibson talks now to the iPaper about how difficult it was and how it really impacted her, and apparently that there was only people like Ncuti Gatwa defending her publicly through Instagram stories, a very non-committal because it's not permanent form of social media post. I honestly think that the calls were coming from inside the house for this. I have no evidence outside of Rusty Davies will say publicly very, angry stuff to people he doesn't like, but then for some reason when it comes to his teenage co-lead on this production, it's absolute crickets publicly. That is honestly my only evidence. I will cop to that. Something doesn't add up here in terms of how she was treated, in terms of the public defence, or should I say the lack of public defence from Bad Wolf or the hires up of the Doctor Who production and producer team. Something doesn't add up here. And I think that we're still going to be having some stories coming out about this production years from now. Even now, when it comes to Ncuti Gatwa saying that it was always the plan to do 2 seasons, and you go back at interview footage and interviews and stuff of him when he accepted the role, and he's like, oh, I'm going to be doing this for a long time. He even says in Legend of Ruby Sunday, I'm going to have this face for a long time. Do you think that this is why they don't have an actual conclusion or goodbye in the reality war? That Millie Gibson as Ruby Sunday doesn't get an actual goodbye and gets kind of disrespected by the Doctor on the way out, and then they never have any sort of closure? Was that just him venting his frustrations because he didn't like Millie Gibson or something? I don't know. This something doesn't add up here. And I'm not trying to be provocative or conspiratorial here, but like I said, insiders were leaking this stuff to the Mirror, and no one from Bad Wolf defends her publicly. No one from Bad Wolf goes to bat for her. She's 19. And once again, we've said before, Russell has priors for this. In 2005 with the treatment of Christopher Eccleston. Are we going to be seeing this again with Ncuti Gatwa and Millie Gibson and maybe Valada Sethu in a couple of years' time when Russell stepped down from the show? Are we going to have stories coming out in 10, 15 years' time about what really happened during the Bad Wolf era? And the fact that, Russell is a very influential and powerful person, powerful creative in the media industry, and Millie Gibson's a 19, or was at the time, 19-year-old actress being raked over the coals in the press. It's frustrating to see. And the fact that this can still happen 20 years later from the same creative team making the same show, Christopher Eccleston in 2005 to Millie Gibson in 2025, the fact that these mistakes are still happening. We've got the Rest is Entertainment podcast. This is their Q&A episode. They were talking about Disney and Doctor Who. And Marina says this about Ncuti Gatwa. These aren't just random people who will just make stuff up on a podcast. You may disagree with their opinions, but they are very well connected media personalities who will have sources, and they can always message people when they don't know anything about a particular topic that they get a question on, so they can get clarification on it. So they do that quite a lot. And Marina reveals something about Ncuti Gatwa that she's heard.
I personally, and this is nothing from anyone on the show, but I think they had a problem with the casting of the lead character. I think Ncuti Gatwa, I am told he didn't particularly love doing it. And it's not...
I am told he didn't particularly love doing it. Who told her? And are these the same supposed insiders who threw Millie Gibson under the bus before a single episode of hers had even broadcast? What is happening at Bad Wolf? Even if it's not Russell, even if it's not Jane, or Julie, or Phil, or whatever, what is happening at Bad Wolf that there's so many stories coming out to members of the press and personalities that negatively reflect the leading actors? What is it about the culture at Bad Wolf, or not even Bad Wolf, just the people adjacent to Russell T Davies, that this keeps happening? What is going on here? Once again, this is one reason I think why we should be getting new blood for the series. Why we should be moving on from these same creatives. People who might have a little bit more care in public. When it comes to defending Ncuti Gatwa and the incredible harassment and racist abuse and bigotry that was thrown his way, maybe Ncuti was saying, we don't want to talk about this, I don't want you defending me in public, because he'd already hired 24/7 security for his family when it was announced that he was the Doctor, because conservatism in the UK is completely unhinged and wants him dead. Maybe they didn't want to stoke that anymore, but for Millie? What's the reason there? Unless you're planting these stories to deliberately discredit her and then not saying anything because it's the narrative you want to perpetuate. Once again, I can't confirm this. I'm just speculating, but there's a clear trend here. There's a very clear trend. Are there any stories about Bad Wolf not related to the Doctor Who productions? That's an excellent question. Do we have any stories about Discovery of Witches? Do we have any stories about I Hate Susie? No, we don't. What is the common denominator here? Is it Phil Collinson? Is it Russell T Davies? Is it someone else below them or equal to them that is also involved in Doctor Who they don't have any sort of check on? I don't know. It's why I'm a bit hesitant to name names, but I think this is just pattern recognition at this point. It's Ben Cook. No, because I actually don't think it's Ben Cook, because I said something on Twitter the other week about how Apparently they spent a big portion of the budget converting it into 4K for Disney Plus. And then he went on a massive go at me for overestimating the show's budget. Pedantic and sarcastic and annoying as Ben Cook is, he actually does have some sort of brand protection. He does want to make sure that Doctor Who is perceived well. Whereas whoever plants these stories about Millie Gibson, whoever leaks this or gives Marina Hyde the scoop about Ncuti apparently not enjoying the role, that's not going to reflect well on the show. I'm not saying that Ben Cook has a modus operandi for whatever, but if he did, it's not this. I think Ncuti Gatwa leaving us mostly because of season 3 not going ahead. He lost out on work because of, yeah, that's the rumours that I've heard. He was recently in a Christmas advert. It wasn't the Marks and Spencer. What was the Christmas advert that Ncuti Gatwa was in? Burberry. It was, yeah, the Burberry Christmas advert with Jennifer Saunders. It is very likely that Ncuti Gatwa earned more for this Burberry 2025 Christmas advert than he did for each season individually of Doctor Who. Ben Cook loves drama. No, Ben Cook does love drama, but he loves drama that doesn't necessarily reflect badly on the individuals at the heart of the show, Ncuti Gatwa and Millie Gibson. Phil Collinson is no longer being credited in BBC articles about the war between the land and the sea and the new Sea Devils edit. Out early? Possibly. I don't know. Phil Collinson does have a temper, I've heard. I don't want to make this as like he said, she said. I just want to acknowledge the pattern. I work in the TV and film industry, okay? I'm really passionate for the advocacy of the people who work in the TV and film industry. So when I see something like this, it just really frustrates me. That you had, like I said, she was a teenager at the time, being flung to the wolves by the tabloids, and no one apart from Ncuti Gatwa in an Instagram story stuck up to defend her, even when Russ T Davies has a very lengthy and public history of going to bat for causes that he believes in, which I admire him for. I'm glad he does that. Believe it or not, I'm using this clip against him, but I'm glad that he said this at the South Bank Sky Arts Awards. I'm glad that he uses his position of authority and his platform to say this stuff. So it just makes it even more confusing that when it comes to protecting his star, he's silent. I think that says something. She was also coming off the back of a 60-year-old soap that launched her career. Yeah, but I'm not sure what that has to do here in particular. But she was a big star for Coronation Street for a few years. My point with her coming off the back of Corrie is that she's been catapulted into a spotlight career-wise, and it seems nobody protected her from the media frenzy. Yeah, that's true. I do think that we need to really push for more duty of care for this sort of stuff. And like, especially when everything becomes a culture war nowadays, I do think we need opposing narratives, and I do think that we need people going to bat for their leads. I think it needs to be part of the equation now. No, but I know that it's not a good position to be in, but we are in that position whether you like it or not. I'm trying to remember how they handled all the misogyny thrown at Jodie Whittaker under Chibnall's time. Did they just not engage? No, I don't think they did engage, no. I know that they were very quick to debunk chaos in Cardiff, which I'm glad that they did. You could easily make a big media news story during the Jodie Whittaker era. If you just type Doctor Who on YouTube and here's like the top 10 videos, and you've got like Jewish like question replacement theory conspiracy shit and all this like obvious bigotry and hatred and stuff, you can just be like, what the fuck's going on here, YouTube? What the fuck's going on here, culture? And you could make that a whole media story, and that immediately like puts them on the defensive and starts like makes them either retract or commit to their horrible ideas, and then that's how you sort of weed it out. Chibnall's a pretty quiet guy anyway, but yeah, I kind of feel like it needs to be part of the job now, as depressing as it is. Whoever takes over from Doctor Who, if Russell is leaving after Christmas, whoever takes over from Russell after Christmas does need to be prepared to get in the trenches somewhat. Even if it's not the showrunner themselves, the top brass, people adjacent to the top brass need to be going to bat for their creatives. We're not in these naive times anymore. Donald Trump was elected president again. You know, we're not in these naive times anymore. They elected the world's most famous paedophile president again, like knowing full well what he was. We're not in these times anymore. 2 Doctor Who stars being harassed by the media, both being from Manchester. Coincidence, you decide, yeah, maybe he just hates Mancunians. They just need to make some kind of statement that immediately proves stuff like that wrong. No need to engage with it, and it stops being the narrative. But yeah, but their excuse being we can't say anything because of spoilers. All you have to do is say, I don't know what these stories are on about. We enjoyed working with Millie. Or like, we love working with Millie. We hope to continue working with Millie. because that also means even if she leaves at the end of the season, you can say, I want to work with her again, similar to how David Tennant has worked with Russ T Davies multiple times. Catherine Tate and Bernard Cribbins worked with Russ T Davies numerous times. You can have these ongoing relationships beyond the immediate show. I think sadly perhaps the showrunners like the ambiguity. They don't throw anyone under the bus directly, but are okay letting these rumours spread that blame the actors. That's what I'm worried about. That's what I'm worried about. If that is the case, and that's a massive if that is the case, it's a massive abuse of authority. It's a massive abuse of power to leak these stories to the press so that you can start spinning a narrative that works against the people you're meant to be looking after. Even if Millie was a diva, even if Millie was tough to work with, once again, massive if, I don't think that justifies this really underhanded way to treat your co-stars. And that is if somebody higher up at Bad Wolf or at the BBC was leaking these stories to the Mirror. Either way, someone from Bad Wolf or adjacent to Doctor Who is pretty consistently, as we saw with the Wrestlers Entertainment, briefing or leaking to media outlets that the show's leading actors are difficult or bad to work with. And this goes as far back as Christopher Eccleston.